My grandma is an Aries, and I always say that Aries are my favorite sign because they're so feisty, and she is feisty. I actually looked at her birth chart the other day, and while I don't know her birth time exactly, she probably had 5 planets in Aries, including her sun sign. She wasn't just an Aries, she was like a Super Saiyan Aries. She was a single mother of 3 children, rioting in municipality council meetings for more rights and money for single mothers in the 1970s and 80s. And as a young child, her parents were part of the resistance during World War II. My grandma would smuggle resistance newspapers to spread the resistance news and updates. She would have the newspapers in the stroller with her dolls and would walk past literal Nazis with a straight face and bring the newspapers where they needed to go. She was a badass. When I was like 10 years old, and probably even before that, she would tell me to tell my mom that I wanted a belly button piercing just to fuck with her a little bit. She would always say what she thinks. She was very unfiltered, but still polite, usually. One year, I think it was the World Cup for football, and they had these vuvuzelas, I think they were called, like a big, I don't even know what it is exactly, but it's a big thing that produces loud sounds, and she would use that to scare the crows away from her balcony, and it added to her satisfaction that the neighbors would sometimes complain about the noise. We also got her a water gun, actually multiple water guns, and she would use them a lot, mostly to scare away the birds so they wouldn't fuck up her plants. She would only like to playfully mess with people, though. She had a very strong sense of justice, but not a lot of patience. When she moved into an assisted living elderly home 5 minutes away from us, I saw her a lot more than when I was a kid. But I have such fond memories of her time before that, too. I would sleep over at her house, and I remember so fondly sitting at her kitchen table, drawing and coloring while she made us dinner. Her entire fridge was covered in magnets. Where she had been or where her kids had been, it really didn't matter where they were from. If it made her smile, it would go on the fridge. And I remember she had this one pen that I was obsessed with. It was like a sexy lady, and if you held the pen upside down, like her clothes would fall off and she would be naked. And I loved it. When she moved close to us, her home hosted a bingo once a month. So for years, most months, we would be playing bingo. My mom, my grandma, and me. As the youngest 2 people at the table, my mom and I would usually play for most of the table to make sure they get their numbers. It was usually like a good 50 people at least, mostly very elderly people. They would drink their advocaat and jenever, and during the break, they had typical Dutch snacks like broodjes croquettes. The only problem is that the breaks were always too long. These were mostly 80-plus-year-olds, and the bingo would start at 7 p.m. We would play bingo for a little bit, and then the break would sometimes last an hour. It's too long, okay? Most of them already skipped their bedtime to be there at the starting time. It was too long. It was too long. It was too long. So anyway, one time my grandma literally started shouting, "We want to play bingo!" And then she started banging her wrists on the table, chanting, "We want bingo! We want bingo!" And my mom and I just looked at each other like, what the fuck? Please stop. But then other people from our table started joining in, banging their fragile wrists on the table, chanting along with my grandma, "We want bingo! We want bingo!" And suddenly almost everyone started shouting, either for bingo or for the shouters to stop shouting. It was pure chaos that my grandma caused because she was bored. Bingo continued very soon after. And I definitely was not able to appreciate this action enough back then because I was mortified. I was a late teen, so I still had a fear of standing out too much, feeling like I needed to blend in. And I don't know if my grandma ever had that feeling. She loved dressing up and looking nice. She loved jewelry. She had boxes and boxes and boxes full of necklaces, brooches, earrings, bracelets. And as a kid, I used to love it when I was allowed to go to her bedroom and just look at and play with the beautiful sparkly things. And we did that until our last day together, going through her beautiful jewelry, still finding new pieces that I've never seen before, with her telling me what it was, where she got it from, or any other story that came up. My grandma had a lot of gemstones too, and a lot of jewelry made from it. Some of it was made by my aunts, and some also came from her father stepdad used to sell jewelry. She loved big statement pieces, big necklaces, big earrings, bracelets that would make noise when she moved her arms, and she always wore lipstick. She didn't necessarily have a signature color, she would always make sure that it matched with her outfit. She loved bright and bold colors in her outfits. She felt muted tones were too boring. She wanted her clothing to be fun. Bright blue, green, any color could get it, but her favorite color was pink. When I think of her, I do imagine her with a bright pinkish kind of tone on her lips. She always had many colors ready to go, and I still have some of her lipsticks. She would never, ever leave the house without lipstick on. She could go without her blush or her mascara, but she would absolutely never, under any circumstance, leave the house without lipstick on. And I never asked her why, but I think it might have been for the same reason that I rarely leave the house without lipstick on. When I first started going to the gym, I even wore lipstick to the gym too, but now I think it's the only place I go without lipstick. Although I still do sometimes wear it on benchmark days because it does make me feel more powerful, stronger. It makes me feel like I did something. It makes me feel not so unprepared for things that might come. It makes me feel just a tad bit more put together. I usually really only wear my full makeup when I'm working or going out. I prefer to be barefaced in my daily life, but I do need the lipstick. I don't need it. I want the lipstick. 3 years ago, when I had my PTSD class, one of the therapists asked me why I always had to red lipstick on, and I told him because my grandma never left the house without lipstick on. He actually challenged me to take it off for the duration of the treatment. He said that I should let my armor down. So I did. And now I can go to the gym without lipstick on. Because it is kind of like, it does feel like my armor. I just started getting into wearing lipstick myself the last few years of her life. I'm from the gloss lipstick era, so a bright color lipstick always felt like a statement. And it was, actually. It's funny because I remember being nervous the first many times, even though I liked it. I guess I didn't want to be too noticeable, which is also funny because I literally had bright green hair. Which she loved, by the way. She didn't necessarily care for the color, I suppose. One time, my mom and I were waiting for her while she got ready, and we heard her say to one of the nurses that she hated my hair. She said it looked like straw, she didn't like the color, she didn't like this, and she didn't like that. And we were just like shocked Pikachu face in the living room, like, what the fuck, Grandma? And then she rolled out in her wheelchair, and she sees us sitting there, and I just stared at her. And with a sweet little voice, she says, without blinking, she just looks at me and says, you still have your green hair. Very good. I was just telling the nurse how much I love it. But she did actually love it though. Maybe not the color so much, but she did love that I played with color and that I dared to be different than the masses. She would always encourage individuality, at least in your face. I wish I had the guts to tell her about the work I do when she was still here. I wasn't very open about it then. I was still very young. I was afraid that she would look down on me. Although I actually very confidently feel now that she would have loved it. I can literally picture the exact face that she would pull if I would tell her. This cheeky, gleeful smile, kind of like a mischievous look she would have, but in a very innocent way, like a child wanting to play mischief. I know she would have been so proud of me for being myself.